Picture this. You walk into a store for a $5 bottle of shampoo. That's it. You got a budget, you've got a plan. But then, somewhere between the sliding glass doors and the checkout line, you completely lose control of your wallet. You walk out with $100 worth of stuff you literally never planned to buy. How does that happen? How does a highly rational, budget-conscious shopper get completely hijacked? Welcome to Market Mind Lab. In this explainer, we're diving deep into a massive business mystery. Today, we're launching a high-stakes investigation into the invisible machinery designed to bypass our rational brains. We're going to uncover the behind-the-scenes strategies, the hidden architecture, and the digital algorithms that businesses use to flip our own psychology right against us. All right, let's get into it. Act 1. The illusion of control. To really understand how we get hacked like this, we first have to admit our own blind spots. See, we love to think our brains calculate value like a perfectly logical spreadsheet, weighing utility, checking the price, assessing the actual need. But in reality, our environment heavily influences us. We're constantly updating what we want based on our immediate surroundings. Our brains compare things, they react, and honestly, they just get tired. And under the right conditions, our brains easily mistake manufactured environmental pressure for our own personal preference. Get this. Research shows that up to 40% of all retail sales are completely unplanned impulse buys. 40%! That isn't just a tiny margin of error, right? That is a multi-billion-dollar industry built entirely on decisions we never actually intended to make. Act 2. The critical decision. So how do businesses actually pull this off? Well, to answer that, we have to travel back in time to an Austrian architect named Victor Gruen. Now, back in 1952, Gruen designed the Southdale Center. And by 1956, the world's very first indoor mall opened its doors. But here's the crazy part. His original goal was to build a utopian, climate-controlled community space, a place where people could just gather, walk around, and socialize safely. But the retail industry noticed something fascinating about human behavior inside his creation, and they totally twisted it into an engine for pure consumption. It got so bad that by 1978, the transformation was complete, and Gruen actually publicly disavowed shopping malls entirely. He literally called his own creations bastard developments. What the retail industry discovered inside those malls is a psychological phenomenon now famously known as the Gruen Transfer. It's wild. It is the exact moment you enter a deliberately confusing, overwhelming space, think massive scale, bright lights, tons of noise. Your brain basically gets overloaded by the hyperreality of the environment. And boom, you completely forget your original goal. That simple $5 bottle of shampoo, gone. You transition instantly from a purposeful shopper into a highly susceptible impulse buyer. Act 3. The architecture of impulse. Okay, so once you've experienced the Gruen Transfer, you're essentially handed off to a series of invisible salespeople. In a physical store, this trap is purely architectural. First up, you've got the decompression zone. That's those first few feet inside a store, where you're just adjusting to the lighting and the music. Retailers know you completely ignore this area, so they don't put anything important there. But as you keep walking, you naturally drift to the right. It's just human nature. And retailers exploit this with what's called the power wall. It's a high-margin, impulse-driven display positioned perfectly in your natural line of sight. And finally, the checkout counter. By the time you actually reach the register, you've suffered major decision fatigue. Your self-control is completely depleted, which makes you incredibly vulnerable to grabbing that random pack of gum or a mini skincare kit right at the very end. Have you ever wondered why stores use open shelving and sample stations? It's not just to be nice. It exploits a cognitive bias called the endowment effect. The exact second you physically reach out and touch a product, your brain subconsciously begins to feel a sense of ownership over it. It's like a psychological switch flips. The friction of the purchase drops dramatically simply because your brain already feels like the item belongs to you. Decoys and digital panic. But physical stores are really only half the story here. Online, the architecture of impulse relies on manipulating how you perceive value. A really classic example of this pricing strategy comes from The Economist. They used to offer 3 tiers: web only for $59, print only for $110, and a combo for $125. Now, almost nobody ever bought the print-only option, so why was it there? Well, it was a decoy. Its sole psychological purpose was to make that $125 combo look like an absolute irrational steal. This is called the decoy effect, or asymmetric dominance. Without that $110 decoy, most people just bought the cheap $59 option. But with the decoy, suddenly everyone justified spending the big bucks. And you see this hidden strategy absolutely everywhere. Think about fast food drink sizes. A small is $1.59, a medium is $1.89, and a large is $1.99. Guys, the medium is the decoy. It exists entirely to make you think, well, shoot, for just 10 cents more, I get the large. You didn't even evaluate if you actually wanted a massive soda. You just evaluated the comparison. The business controlled the context, and because of that, they completely controlled your choice. Now, in the digital space, marketers supercharge these decoys with the fear of missing out. Good old FOMO. You know the pop-ups. Your discount expires tonight. Only 2 rooms remain. Someone in your town just bought this. These tactics manufacture artificial panic. They trigger deep emotional urgency. Suddenly, you're not making a logical choice about buying something. You're urgently defending yourself against a perceived loss. Act 4. The consequences. So what exactly happens when businesses successfully bypass our analytical thinking like this? We really have to look at the severe fallout of these engineered choices, and it starts with retail therapy. Behavioral economics shows us that when our self-control is compromised, maybe by sadness, stress, or just feeling out of control in our daily lives, we become incredibly prone to impulsive consumption. We aren't buying things because we need them. We're buying them to trigger a fast, short-term dopamine release. The actual act of buying temporarily restores this artificial feeling of power and control over our environment. And here's the craziest part. We actually have the biometric proof of this emotional hijack. This chart shows electrodermal activity, or EDA. It tracks the physiological arousal in a consumer. Look at the calm baseline period on the left, and then boom. Notice that massive spike the exact moment the shopper engages in an emotional purchase? That right there, that is your nervous system being hacked in real time. The crucial takeaway here is that when you're in this spiked emotional state, the immediate goal of just feeling better completely overrides your long-term plans. Your rational brain is effectively unplugged. But as we all know, this dopamine hit is incredibly short-lived. Almost inevitably, that emotional high crashes hard, leading straight into post-purchase regret, or PPR. You bought the thing to feel better, but now you just feel guilt, financial stress, and honestly, even worse than before you walked into the store. And this cycle, it is hitting Generation Z harder than anyone else. Being digital natives, Gen Z is always active on social media, which makes them perfectly exposed to algorithmic lifestyle targeting. They're constantly bombarded with these highly curated influencer lifestyles and artificial scarcity, which just cranks their FOMO up to 11. This constant, heavy pressure to keep up leads to frequent impulse buying, and sadly, it traps a lot of young consumers in a pretty vicious cycle of early financial stress and emotional instability. Act 5. Taking back control. All right, so we've seen the architectural traps, the decoy pricing, and that brutal emotional crash. So how do we fix it? Defeating this psychological warfare requires actively building your own mental defenses. Step 1. Recognize your emotional state before you ever start shopping. Are you stressed? Are you upset? If so, you are a prime target for retail therapy. Step 2. Spot the artificial urgency. When you see a glowing countdown timer or a weird decoy price, call it exactly what it is. It's a structural hack, not a real emergency. And finally, step 3. Force a shift in your brain. Move from fast, reactive intuition to slow, logical reasoning. Literally just give yourself a cooling off period before you hit that buy button. Ultimately, every single element of a store, whether it's the physical shelves you walk past or the digital algorithms tracking your clicks, is perfectly designed to make choices for you, all while tricking you into feeling like you're the one in charge. So the next time you feel that overwhelming, urgent desire to buy something you totally didn't plan for, just pause. Look around at the architecture, the pricing, the lighting, the countdown timers, and ask yourself a very simple question. Who actually made this decision? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep your guard up out there and stay curious.